So in the last class, we discussed about Amazon Web Services. So in that one, we have discussed about some of the compute services which have been there. Okay, so like you are in EC2, we have discussed. It is Elastic Compute Cloud. We have been used. Okay. So now the next is your compute services, which is provided by your Amazon Web Services, which is nothing but your Amazon AWS Cloud Formation. Okay, so in the Amazon Cloud Formation, basically it is model that characterizes the EC2 instances. Okay, so now so next is your Amazon Cloud Formation. So basically, this is modeled by characterizing the EC2 instances. Where is your EC2 instances is nothing but what? Elastic Compute Cloud. So this is use you have to have the EC2 instances, and in that particular instances, this particular cloud formation is going to take place. So what concept is going to be used in that particular compute services? So if we talk about the AWS Cloud Formation, it is going to be used in the form of JSON formatted text file. So normally you have gone through the JSON formatted text file, I think, right? So as JSON stands for JavaScript object notation. So what that particular JavaScript object notation is going to tell about. So what it means, what is your JavaScript object notation specifies. So your JavaScript object notation. So if we talk about the JSON, so here the JSON is nothing but what? So JavaScript object notation. Okay. So it is nothing but JavaScript object notation. So it is going to specify you JavaScript object notation. Okay, that is what the JSON refers to. So that means that particular code is written using the JavaScript. So once it is written using the JavaScript, so that is basically a lightweight data extension format. So your JSON is nothing but what? So it is nothing but it's a lightweight. It's nothing but a lightweight. Okay, so there is a lightweight data interchange format which you are going to have. So that is going to have the lightweight interchange format. So now, why it has to be in this particular format? Why that particular cloud formation which you are going to have that should be in JSON format? Because in this particular format, if we talk about the JSON format, so why it has to be there? Why it should be there in this particular format? If you're going to tell, so this because it is easy to read and write by human being. So it is easy to read and write by human being. That is what it is going to be used by your JSON format. It is easy to use. Okay, it is easy to use by humans. Okay, to read and write. Read and write. Okay. So basically, if we take about the JSON, JSON is basically built on two structures. Okay. So when you talk about the structures, what do you mean by structure? So structure is nothing but what? Structure is nothing but a collection of different data types, what we are going to have. So here also the same thing. So if you call that one as in terms of built on two structures, we are going to tell. So what are these two structures? When you talk about the structures, it is going to have the name and value pairs. That means here the name and value pairs is going to refer with respect to the structure. So one is your two structures which is going to have in your JSON format is. So if we talk about the JSON, okay, JSON is going to have two structure. It's going to have the two structure. One is collection of name and value pair. So it's going to have collection of name or value pair. So the other is your ordered list of. It is going to have the ordered list. So it is going to have the two different structures. Your JSON formatted file. So one is your collection of name and value pairs, which is referred as collection of, that is nothing but collection of different names are nothing but what? It's a collection of different data types. So I mean, if you are following your C language, that will be specified in terms of structures. So if you are reading with respect to the object-oriented concept, so that is going to be defined by the object. Okay, that will be defined by the object, or sometimes in some book they are going to refer as record. Okay, so then the second structure is going to have the ordered list. So list is nothing but what? It's an ordered list, and it's going to have the similar element. So it's going to have the similar element in that one. So if you are going to have the similar element, what that means? So the elements which you are going to store in your that particular structure is your array. Okay. So you're going to have two different types of primitive data types. One is primitive and other is derived. So this particular second structure which you are going to have, which is in ordered list of values, that will come in your arrays. Okay, so where arrays contains a similar data type of data elements. That is one simple example to understand, to make you understand. Okay. So next is for your AWS Cloud Formation. So it is going to provide you the simple and declarative way. Okay, so it is going to have the simple and declarative way to build complex systems. Okay, so that's what is going to be provided here. So next is your Amazon Beanstalk. This is also one of the compute services. It is provided by your Amazon. So Amazon Web Services Elastic Beanstalk. So what it consists of? So it's simply a easy package application and deploy them on the AWS cloud. So whatever the application you want to deploy, so that particular application you are going to have it, and you are going to build that particular application, and you are going to deploy that particular. You can deploy it on that particular type on top of your Amazon cloud. Okay. So now whatever the service when you are accessing through the cloud. Okay. Okay. So if you are accessing, if you are going through the cloud, so whatever the service you are going to have, the service will be accessed by whom? The service is accessed by or through web only. So the service will be accessed by through the web itself. Okay, so that's what it is going to tell. So here the service is available for web applications, and it will be deployed using the Java Tomcat technology stack. So that Java technology stack which is going to have here is, so you're going to have the Tomcat server. So using this particular Tomcat server, so most of you have gone through the Tomcat server. If you don't know, you just go through it once. So it is similar to your Java server. Java, okay. So that is your PHP or web server. It is like a Tomcat server where you are going to host your applications. Okay. So that is one of the Tomcat server which you are going to have. So here, whenever you are going to have the service which is accessing, which your people are accessing uh, through the web. So that particular service will be accessed through that particular web only. So the next type is your Amazon Elastic MapReduce. So you're going to have the Amazon Elastic MapReduce here. So in the Amazon Elastic MapReduce, what it is going to provide? So basically it is going to, as the name indicates, Elastic MapReduce. So all of you have gone through the MapReduce concept, right? So we know how the MapReduce is going to work. Okay, so we are going to have the mapper. So after mapping it, I am going to difference have the reducer. So in between reducer, you are going to have the sorting and shuffling will be there. Okay, so these things has to be taken care by your cloud. It is nothing but this particular tool or this particular service which is provided by the AWS. It provides the AWS user. Okay, with what it is going to provide? It is going to provide with the cloud computing platform for what? For MapReduce application. Okay, 1 minute. Hello. Hello. Here is Lokesh. ಸೆಮಿನಾರ್ನ ಸಾಯಂಕಾಲನೇ ತಗೊಳ್ಳೋಣ ಬಿಡು ಅದಕ್ಕೇನಂತ. ಸರಿ. ತಗೊಂಬಿಡೋಣ ಆಮೇಲೆ. ಸರಿ ಆಯ್ತು. ಓಕೆ, ರಿಪೀಟ್ ಅವ್ರು ಬೇಡ, ಯಾರ್ದು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿಲ್ವೋ ಅವ್ರು ಕೂಡ ಕೇಳೋ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ. ಸರಿ, ಓಕೆ ಓಕೆ ಸರಿ. So now here side is side. It's basically utilizes the Hadoop as the MapReduce engine. So it utilizes the Hadoop as the MapReduce engine. So in this one, it is going to use the Hadoop as the MapReduce engine. So here the Hadoop is nothing but the product of your Google. Okay, so it is going to be the product of the Google. It's going to make use of that one. So these are some of the compute services which it is going to be used. Okay, so next, when it comes to the storage services, the next type of services which it is going to provide is your storage service. So some of the storage services provided by the Amazon are, so it is going to have the S3 key concept. Next is your Amazon Elastic Blast Store. Next is your Amazon Elastic Cache. So next is structured storage solution. So next is your Amazon CloudFront. So if we talk about the S3, so your if S3 is nothing but what? It's nothing but simple storage service. So if we talk about the S3, it is S3 is nothing but your simple storage service if it is going to have. So here also it is going to have the Elastic Block Store. So this is, so it is going to provide you the block store block. So here, whatever the file system you are going to have, okay, file system you are going to have, that will be stored in the form of blocks. That will be stored in the form of blocks here. Okay, so you are going to have that one. So when you talk about your Amazon, so now if you talk about the Amazon Elastic Cache here, so if you talk about the Amazon Elastic Block Store here, so in the Amazon Elastic Block Store, whatever the file system or whatever the storage you are going to store, so that will be in the form of blocks. So in the form of block means what? So it is going to have this part. So the blocks is file system you are been read already, I think. So in that particular type of file system, you are going to make use of that one. Okay, so that's how it is going to be stored there. So next is your Amazon Elastic Cache. So as the name indicates, Amazon Elastic Cache. So you are going to have the cache. So when you want to make, so if you want to have this particular block store to be installed, so that I will come in detail about in the next few minutes. So next is Elastic Cache. So it is similar to the cache. So whenever you want to access or whenever you want to perform as an issue when you are having, so we are going to make use of your Amazon Elastic Cache. So this also it will be built on top of your it will be built. So if you take the cache, it will be built on top of your EC2 instances. So any instance you can create, right? So it cannot be separately used on top of any other compute services. But only thing is you have to use this particular Elastic Cache So only similar thing which you are going to have in your mind is, so whatever the service, that is storage services, whatever the storage services you are going to provide. So this has to be accessed. This has to be accessed through what? It has to be accessed through any of the instances, through any of the instances. First, you have to create the instance of compute type. On top of that particular compute type, I have to have some storage services. So you are going to have that particular storage service in that one. So next is a structured storage solution. As the name indicates, structured storage solution. So what it is going to store? So basically, it is going to store the structured data. So if you take the structured storage solution, so it is going to store the structured data which you are going to have. Okay. So now here, whatever the core concepts or service which you are going to have. So basically, among these 5 different storage services, so these are the not 4, 5 services which are there now at present. At present, more than this particular number is there. But as this particular book is been written, the Amazon was providing 5 services. Okay. So now if you go and see, there are more than 5 different storage services are there from your Amazon. So now here, whenever you are going to have the core services, you are going to have, which is represented by your Amazon Simple Storage Service. So what are these core components you are going to have? So what are the core service? It is represented by Amazon Simple Storage Service, and what are the components it is going to involve in that one. So let us see further. So if we talk about the core components of S3, so what are the 2 components of core S3? So the core components of S3 is one is your bucket, other is your object. So one is your bucket, other is the object, or the 2 components where S3 is going to have. Okay. So next, when it comes to the storage services, if we talk about the S3 key concepts, so as we have discussed yesterday itself, so it is going to be this, even this one is going to be accessed only through the REST interface. So this we have been already seen. So when you talk about the REST interface, that is representational state transfer. So what it is going to provide? It is going to provide you the architectural style for providing the standards. Okay. So between what it is going to provide the architectural style between the 2 systems on the web. So when you want to make the access between the 2 different people, that is, one is the client and another is the server. So when you are making the communication between the client and the server, so it is going to give some architectural reference. So architectural style is going to provide, and you are going to make the transfer of information from between the 2 system. And by doing this one, what we are going to obtain, so you are going to make this particular systems to be easier, and it will be easier for communication between the 2 systems. So in here you are going to have the communication. So the two people should be there. One will be the server, other will be the client. Okay. So one will be the server, and another will be the client. So as I told you, what is the difference between your representational stress, why you are going to make use of the REST interface, that is your representational state transfer interface, or your SOP represents the simple object access protocol. So yesterday we have discussed that one. So now here, when you talk about the representational state transfer, so basically it will be stateless transfer. Why you require stateless? It is nothing but what? So it is going to have the client and the server. So whatever the changes you have to do. So first is, for example, I am going to have the changes in my server. So whatever the changes you are going to have done in the server, so it is not come to know to the mind of client. So that means, so without knowing what the service is changed, so your service is going to work. Similarly, if you are making any changes to the client, so if any code changes is going to be done with respect to the client, so code can be changed at the client time, or the code can be changed at the server side. Okay. So now, without affecting any operation, so that means if a client is requesting the server, for example, so when you are doing the communication, what will happen? So server and client will be communicating. When they are communicating, what I need to do? So from something will come to my mind. So I have to change this particular part of the code in my server. So then what the normal procedure it has to be done? So I have to stop server. Okay. First I have to stop server. I have to make the change in the code, and I have to deploy it. But it is not the case with respect to your representational state transfer. So in this particular representational state transfer, what will happen? Even the server is running and the client is communicating. So when the client is communicating with the server, what will happen? So basically, the the changes what is happening inside your server. So that won't be affecting any changes in any operation in the client. Similarly, if you are changing any part of the code in your client, okay, so it won't affect the operation of the server. So that is vice versa. Okay, so that is going to happen in your storage services, which you are going to have. So next is when you are going to have the storage services. So your storage services basically organized in two-level hierarchy. So it's going to have the two-level hierarchy. So that what we have discussed already. So it is going to be have the object end, bucket end objects. So that is two-level hierarchy, which is going to having there. So next, when you are going to have the S3. So whatever the contents, it is going to be reflected in your storage. So whatever the contents or whatever you are going to store in your S3. So the contents is not easily immediately available to the user. So whenever you are going to store some data, you are going to store the data. So immediately that particular data is not available. So immediately not available. Okay. So it is not available immediately. So it is not immediately not available. Okay. So that it is going to have. So now whatever the request, it is going to happen there. Okay. So whatever the request you are going to have, so that won't be available at any time. Okay. So now, so basically what this particular Amazon S3 is going to provide you. So basically it is going to access the storage. So then occasionally this particular system is going to fail. Okay, occasionally when you are going to use this particular type of storage as a service, so this particular storage is going to fail occasionally. That is one of the key features or key concepts which you are going to have in your simple storage service. Okay, so then how we are going to access this particular S3? So it is going to be the next leading technology which you are going to have with respect to the scalability, data availability, security, and performance. So your storage, they were S3. So when you are going to have, so this particular request is there, right? So in your repetitive request, you have to get the data from the, and you have to put the data to the server, delete the data, and all of the servers HTTP request you are going to have, which is head and which is post. So all of you have read all these things in your web technology, I think, right? So in your web technology, all of you have read this one. The same operation here it is going to perform because all the services which you are going to access in the cloud is through the web itself. Okay, that's what we are going to make use of the HTTP request which you are going to have. So now here also you are going to have the resource naming. So here you are going to have the URLs will be there. So URIs, so which is referred as uniform resource identifiers. So how we are going to identify that resource in the web? So you are going to rename that particular resources. So resource naming should be there. So using that type of resource naming, you are going to make use. We are going to make use of the uniform resource identifiers, and using the uniform resource identifiers, you are going to access with the help of these commands. That is HTTP request. You are going to access those services. Okay. So now when you are going to have the URIs, so here URI you are going to have, it is nothing but we are going to have the URL. So URL is nothing but, it is nothing but the domain name. So if you talk about the domain name, your domain name is nothing but what? It's nothing but the IP address. So for that particular IP address, some name will be given. So name is given for that particular IP address. Then that is referred as domain name. So that you people know, I think already. So the name which you are going to give for a particular domain is referred for the name which you are going to give for your IP address, that is referred as your domain name. So now when you are going to have the storage as a service here, so when you want to have to access the bucket, so we are going to have two different types. One is your buckets. So you are going to have, okay, so you are going to have the buckets and objects which you are going to have here. So when you are going to have this particular simple storage service, it is basically offers in three different ways. So it basically offers in three different ways of addressing the bucket. How it is addressed. So it can be addressed in canonical form, it can be addressed in subdomain form, or it can be addressed using the virtual hosting form. So now next, when it comes to the canonical form, how it will be addressed. So when your standard canonical form, when you're going to have, that will be addressed in terms of S3 Amazon Web Services. So what type of services you are going to access through the Amazon Web Services, and what is the name given for your bucket name. So here, when you're talking about the bucket, Okay, so when you talk about the bucket is nothing but the space. Okay, so normally if you tell for what purpose you are going to use the bucket in your home, to store water or some cloths you are going to put into the bucket, right? So here also the bucket is there. So inside in this bucket which you are going to access in your Amazon Web Services, what we are going to keep there? So we are going to keep some data or information. So we are going to keep the information in the buckets in your Amazon Web Services storage as a service here. Okay, so that is what it is going to have here. So now next comes, so when you are referring with respect to the subdomain form, so when you are going with the subdomain form, it is going to be ended with some .com, or so when you are going to have the .com, it's for commercial purpose, right? So as you already know that, so the extension of your web is represented what type of website it is, whether it's a commercial website or whether it belongs to India or whether it's belong to the educational institution, depending upon the type of the URL which you are going to represent. So that particular extension you are going to get in your URL, right? So you are going to have the ending like, so .win will be there, so .in is there, .com is there, right? So similarly .edu.in is there, so commercial input. So there are many extensions are there. So like edu is also there for education field if you are using. So edu is there. Okay. So there are some of the extensions. IN refers here India. So that particular website can be accessed only through India. So there is a COM stand for commercial. Okay. So whereas your EDU stand for educational field. So that you think you have been come across in your web technology. So I don't want to go in depth about further with respect to that one. So now when you are going to have the S3, so when you are representing with respect to the subdomain form, so here you are going to have the bucket name .s3.amazon.com, which you are going to have. So next, if you are going to have the virtual hosting, so virtual hosting is nothing but what? So you are going to have the virtual machine. So inside that particular virtual machine, you are going to host your S3. So that is how it will be done. So when you are going to have the virtual hosting, so the virtual hosting form, it can be happen using http bucketname.com. So you are going to have the http bucket name. So http bucket name dot so com you are going to have. So that is what all you are going to have your virtual hosting. So that will be running under virtual machine. So you are going to have the instances. So it is going to run on top of the instance. So this particular runs will be top on of the instance which you are going to have. So we have seen how to create the virtual machine, right? So virtual machine you are going to know. So after deploying that particular virtual machine, on top of that particular virtual machine, you are going to deploy your virtual hosting. So that is how your uh, addressing will be done in your virtual hosting. Okay. So the next is buckets. What do you mean by bucket? So when you talk about the buckets, we have come across, as I told you that some buckets will be there. So with respect to the buckets, so the what that contains. So your bucket is nothing but what? It's a container of objects. Okay, so it is container of the object. What is the object? So object contains records. So object is nothing but records. So if we talk about the OOPS concept, OOC concept, so what is an object? Object is nothing but the instance of a class. Instance of a class. So here also you are going to have the class, right? So if that's why it is called as what the class contains. Class contains a different function, different data it is going to have. It is similar to the structure. So it may be either a record container of objects or records or structure. As we have seen that it is going to have two different types of structures. So now after it's containers of object, so virtual drive hosted. So it is told that you are going to have the drive. Okay. So it is going to have the virtual drive hosted. So virtual drive hosted you are going to have here. Okay. So virtual drive. So that means hard disk will be there. The same type of hard disk you are going to host it. So when you are going to have the hard disk, so normally if you take the hard disk drive, so the size may be varying from 4 GB or 8 GB or 16 GB, okay, or 32 GB. So all of you have gone through these particular versions, right? 16 GB or 128 GB. So these are the size of your hard disk. So depending upon, so but whatever the size you are going to have, it will be in the power of 2. It will be in the power of 2. Okay, so because you are basically, if you take the memory or you are processing, so both will understand only binary values. Whatever the data you are going to keep in your computer, so that will be stored in terms of ones and zeros only. So that's why whatever, whenever you are discussing with respect to the space, even the space, it is going to be represented in terms of uh, power of 2 only. So now when you are going to have the object virtually drive hosted, which is on the S3 distributed storage here, so it is distributed. Why it is distributed? That means it won't be in a single place, so a single location. So if you have the server, okay, so this may be in some, it may be in Singapore, one bucket may be in Singapore, bucket may be in London, okay, so one bucket may be in Japan, or one bucket may be in Washington, okay, so one bucket may be in Washington. So that if you go and do in the real time world, you come to know. So sometimes what will happen, if for example, if you take your this one only, for your Teams only, if you take, so Teams basically uses what? So it's a product of your Microsoft Team, is a product of Microsoft. So if you want to store that one, it is going to make use of the platform Microsoft Azure. Okay, so there is a best example where we can give for your platform as example. So your Microsoft Team is where it is going to store the data, right? So all this data which you are going to store now, it will be stored in some cloud only. Okay, that is OneDrive. Have it from your Microsoft. So that particular cloud which is going to give for storage is called as OneDrive. Okay, so that is, but it is also a cloud services. But it is provided by whom? So that is provided by your Microsoft, which is similar to your S3, which is similar to your S3. So now when you are going to access the different object, so what do you mean by object? So object is basically is identified by name that needs to be unique within the bucket and which the content is stored. So you're going to have the object. Object is nothing but, as I told you, that it's nothing but the instance of a class. When you are going to have the class, a class will be having its own name. So here also similarly. So whatever the object you are going to have, what's a contain object. So inside the bucket there will be a number of objects. So I want to differentiate the n number of different objects, right? If I want to differentiate, what I need to do, so whether I have to give some ID for that one, or whether I have to give some name for that particular object. So here, even S3, they are going to provide you, you are going to identify the object which is inside the bucket by using the name. So those names should be unique within the bucket. Okay, so those names should be unique inside the bucket in which the content is stored. So in that particular bucket, on that particular object where the content is stored, that should be unique. And it should provide the access control and security. So next comes the question, what do you mean by access control? Oh, so what is access control? So access control is nothing but what? So if we talk about the access control, so if we take the access control and policy here, so what do you mean by access control? So access control is nothing but security technique. So it is nothing but the security technique. So it is a security technique. So that regulates who or what can view. So that means it is going to provide the features to access by only certain people. So that is what the access control. So as the name indicates, access control. That means that particular access will be given to who a certain people. That's it. So this is one of the security technique, what they are going to give. So what it is going to do, it is going to regulate. So what regulation it is going to give? So it is going to give the regulation that who can use that one and what can be viewed for that one. And from where it is going to use. So from your S3, what you are going to access? You are going to access the resources. What are the different resources you can use it, and what are the different resources you can view it. So I can use it or view it. That depends upon the type of the access which is given to you people or to the user. Okay, sometimes what will happen? So even if you take, for example, Google form you are taking, for example, I'm telling. So it is not related to your Amazon Web Services. So if you take the Google form, sometimes what or Google link, if Drive link which you have created, sometimes what will happen when you want to open the document, it will tell you that only you can view the document. So it will, you cannot modify the document. That's what it is going to tell. So that's what it's going to give you the description. Okay, so it's going to have the access control and security, and it's going to access the it's going to give the permission who can view and who can edit. in a cloud computing environment. Okay. So and depending upon the different permissions can be used. As I told you that, so it is going to have the different permissions. And the different permission is either read or write permission. Who can write onto the particular object, or who can read, who can have the access to that particular object. So that particular thing it is going to provide in your bucket for that particular object which you are going to have. Okay. So I will stop here now. So for your Amazon services. So tomorrow we will discuss about your different storage services, which is nothing but your Amazon Elastic Web Cloud. Okay. So I will stop now for today. So if you have any doubt, you can ask.